The next tool we'll look at will be the chop saw. Now, this is very similar to a radial arm saw, just a great deal more compact. It has a 12-inch blade, so it can actually cut through thicker material than the table saw can. It's permanently mounted to the table. They do make models that are portable. This one is stationary. And there's a couple of things that you would need to know about it to begin with. First of all, you don't actually plug it in until you're ready to operate it. So you would plug the machine in, and then you would hook it up to a vacuum. Now we have a shop vacuum cleaner over here, and you connect the hose to the back of the machine. And before you make a cut, you would simply turn the vacuum cleaner on. Now, once you have this done, now you're ready to release the arm. There's a white button right under here, a chrome button, it's not white. But you would pull that out, and that releases the head. Now, on the top, there's a button that will turn on a light. Now, this light helps you locate exactly where on the board the blade is going to go. Now, if we put a board up, and as we bring the saw down, you'll notice that it forms a shadow. And that's a shadow of the actual blade itself. So you can get a very accurate setting on this. You just simply put the shadow right on your line and make your cut. Now this generally just simply goes straight down to make your cut. And that will work just fine on up to about 4 or 5 inches of material. Now this also has an arm that will swing. So you're able to go through thicker material. So if you're cutting thicker or wider material, you would simply slide the arm back, turn the machine on, lower the blade till it goes through the material, and then slide it back and let it up. It is adjustable for the angle. If you loosen the locking lever and push this inner lever, this will slide in both directions, so you can cut at different angles to either side. You can also change the angle on the blade itself, so you can make compound cuts with this. That comes in extremely handy when you're doing things like crown molding, which requires a compound cut. Now, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in and show you one more thing about the saw. When you pull the trigger on this, there's a very powerful motor in here, and when you turn it on, the torque of that motor has an effect on the arm, both when you turn it on and when you turn it off. When you turn the machine on, it has a tendency to want to lift the entire arm. And it will do that because of the torque on that motor. Now, to overcome that, you have to, number one, know that it's going to happen, and two, put extra pressure down so you can hold the tool steady. Now, it also happens when you release the trigger. The arm wants to go down. So you just have to be aware that the machine is going to want to move on its own. Up when you turn the machine on, and down when you turn it off. And as long as you're prepared for that, it's not going to be a problem for you. You do have fences on here that you can adjust. That's generally something that you don't need to worry about. From time to time, you would change the angle. But very seldom would you change the angle on the blade itself. We just don't do that much in the way of compound cuts in here. Now the guard on the saw, as you can notice, as you bring the blade down, the guard bends back out of the way and then it returns when you let the saw up. Another thing that you really need to know about a chop saw is this saw is not designed to cut short pieces. There's too much of a gap in the fence on a chop saw, so that if you put up a small piece and you try to cut it and it's not supported, the cutoff piece is not supported well by the other fence, the pressure that the blade puts on the work will actually cause a kickback and it will throw that piece against the wall behind the saw. So it's just important to know that this is not designed to cut small pieces. If you want to cut small pieces, the best way to do that is with a jig on the table saw that's designed for that purpose. Now, another thing you need to be concerned with is the table base is fairly small. So if you're going to cut a longer piece, you need to have a way to support the ends that are hanging off the table. Now, these are the best way to do it. They're shop made with a piece of 2x4 and a piece of plywood, but it will support this piece of wood at exactly the right height. So when you make your cut, the piece doesn't fall. And we're not going to actually make any cuts on it, but you can see how important it would be to have one of these under the work. There's also another one that is made for the other side. So depending on how long the piece of wood is and how long the piece you're cutting, you can actually move it where you span both of them. It's just important that before you make a cut on a chop saw, if you have a longer piece, that you support the end so it can't drop on you and possibly you can mess up the edge of your board with the blade if the piece falls. Now, it's a fairly simple tool to operate. You just have to be careful with it. The 6-inch rule applies, so when you're making a cut, you would not get your fingers close to that blade. You're going to be back over here at least 6 inches away from that blade when you're making the cut. Now, you can use the saw right or left-handed. It would work either way. So whichever is more convenient for you, then you can do it that way. When you're cutting at angles, sometimes this left or right hand becomes more important. There's a number of other adjustments on the chop saw that students will not be concerned with. If you find yourself creating a project that needs a complicated setup, then your instructor would take care of that for you. Now that's the biggest part of what you need to know about a chop saw. When it comes to the real specific stuff, before you actually operate it yourself, your instructor will go over everything with you. But this is the basics that you need to know for operation and safety of the chop saw. Now, when it's time to put the saw away and we're finished with it, we want to make sure we turn that light back off. We put the blade all the way back down and lock it in place by pushing the silver lever back in. You would disconnect the shop vacuum and you would unplug it. And then this is the way that you would leave the chop saw. And that's going to cover everything that you need to know about the chop saw. And we'll be back later with another tool on another day.